we're going to have a quick discussion here because I have a message for you from your cervix. Stop checking it. Seriously, you don't need to check it in labor. You don't need to check it before labor. You don't need your care provider to tell you how dilated you are. You need to stop checking it. And here is why. Because if you keep checking your cervix, if you keep relying on that indicator to tell you whether or not you're going to go into labor or whether labor is progressing, you're going to end up in a C-section. Yeah, I said it. I totally just said it, but it's true. This is what is going to happen to you if you keep relying on your cervix. If you keep relying on that dilation and having your care provider check your cervix, you are more likely to end up in a C-section. I know that's a radical thing to say, but here is why this matters. And this is why I'm saying this. First of all, if your cervix is not dilating at 1 centimeter per hour while you're in labor, if your care provider believes that your cervix needs to dilate 1 centimeter per hour because they have the BS model of medicine where they think that your body is defective and broken and isn't going to work in its own way and unfold in its own natural way because they haven't read this book, Reclaiming Childbirth as a Rite of Passage, if they're saying that to you, here is what is going to happen. They are going to break your waters, or they are going to run Pitocin. Or if you are a VBAC mom, they may say, you're failing to progress. It's another C-section for you. Boom, you've just landed yourself back in the operating room. Pitocin, as you know, will lead to more C-sections because again, you are hijacking your body's ability to do what it needs to do to birth your baby. It is not going to facilitate a physiological birth. Pitocin also hurts like hell. It is what people call liquid fire, liquid hell fire. My friend Jenny actually says, take Pitocin and stick it in your own vein because she hates it that much. It hijacked her labor. It made things absolutely horrific for her. And she wound up into, what did I say? A C-section. If you don't believe me, if you want to know more about Pitocin, I have a video and you can watch the interview that I did with my friend Sam back in 2020 about Pitocin. She actually talks about this with the truth of induction. She's a nurse clinician. She's seen it. I have seen this over the years. Every time that Pitocin is involved, you're more likely to have a C-section. You're more likely to get the epidural. You're more likely to be told baby is stuck if you have Pitocin. Pitocin was never intended to speed up your labor. And yet this is what is happening in the maternity care system. So Pitocin, bad news, Pitocin. You don't want it. But if you're failing to progress, they're going to push Pitocin. They're going to try to break your waters. They're going to do all of these things to try to get labor going and back on their track. Their reasons are they want you to birth in the most efficient, fast way possible. And none of that is physiological birth. None of it. So if you want a natural birth, you want to stay the hell away from cervical checks. Okay? You want to stay away from them. Stop checking your cervix. Please stop checking your cervix. The other thing, I said that if you are having your cervix checked before labor has even started, do you know what's going to happen? Your care provider is going to go, you're not dilated yet. I can stretch you to maybe 1 centimeter, but things just aren't happening. How about we do a membrane sweep? That's still an induction. And if it doesn't work, they're going to push induction. The whole point of the cervix check is to see if your cervix is doing what they think it should be doing and basically labeling you as a defective machine if it's not doing that thing. But here is the actual truth. Your cervix is not a crystal ball. It is not a crystal ball. Okay? And I learned this lesson the hard way because when I was pregnant with my daughter, I knew my cervix wasn't crystal ball. I knew that. I knew that dilation meant nothing. I knew I didn't have to have a single vaginal exam. But there was still that little voice, that little cultural voice in my head that was saying, I need to know where my progress is at, because otherwise I won't ever know if I'm going into labor or if this is the real thing. So what did I do in early labor? I agreed to a cervical check, and it sucked. It was the most horrifically painful thing I had ever had. I was crawling on my bed trying to get away from my midwife's fingers, even though I agreed to this stupid thing. And it turns out it really doesn't make a damn bit of difference. Why? Because my cervix actually closed up on my midwife's fingers. My cervix was like, nope, we're shutting this whole thing down. So I went from 6 centimeters in active labor to everything shutting up, done, cervix closed, baby sucked back up. This isn't safe to birth, and we're stalling the whole thing. If I had been in the hospital, you know what would have happened. You're failing to progress. Labor has stopped. We need to run Pitocin and break your waters. But I was home. So I sent the midwife home. I sent the doula home. I went to bed. After having something to eat. And then when I woke up, I had a little bit of cramping because I thought it was just from the cervical check. And I ate and I slept some more. And then at 5 o'clock at night, I started to realize that these weren't cramps. It was actual surges, waves of contractions. And I didn't call the midwife back. I didn't call her back. Not until the moment when I was like, I don't want to do this anymore. This is getting really intense. I'm probably in active labor now after 5 hours of being in the pool and doing the moaning and everything and doing the rhythm and feeling it's like, this isn't that bad. And all of a sudden my water's released and there was my daughter's head. Not a single cervical check, and that baby was born. Physiological birth happened because I finally stopped checking my cervix. And that is why you need to be really careful about this, because the culture that we live in is very dilation happy. It's a very dilation happy culture. How effaced are you? How dilated are you? It's a question in every single mom group, and it needs to stop. If you want to have a natural birth, you need to avoid the most BS reason to undermine all that, which is the cervical checks. You don't need them. You don't need them before labor. You don't need them during labor. You don't need them before you're pushing. Unless you feel that there's a problem, you don't need them. It will happen. You will birth your baby. Do you think that we had cervix checks in the dawn of time? See this cat here? This cat, her mother gave birth to her without a single cervix check. All of our mammals give birth without a single cervix check. Humans are the only ones who seem to think that our cervix doesn't work. We're the only ones. And that is due to our conditioning and our brain. So I am telling you right now, you need to stop that. And this is just one of the things that can undermine your natural birth plans before you even get into the labor room, before you even call your midwife to your home birth. These are the things that can undermine you, because if you don't believe that your cervix is going to open and that your baby is going to come out, if you think that you need to have some sort of arbitrary dilation, then what's going to happen is that your cervix is going to get checked and your care provider is going to say, you're 6 centimeters, you're pretty close, but you might not be. And then you'll be like, I was 6 centimeters. I don't understand. Why isn't this working? Now your body's tired. Now your body is starting to slow down again. Now your labor's slowing. Now it's like, okay, it's time to rest. But you had that cervix check and you were 6 centimeters before. And now you're having another one. And now your care provider says, you're not 6 centimeters, you're only 3 centimeters. I don't know what the hell that other nurse was talking about. You're not in labor. We need to run Pitocin. That's not what happened. What happened is your cervix was 6 centimeters and then it closed up again. because you're tired and because labor needs to follow its own pattern, not the pattern of the textbook. And so then you're in labor and you go in and things are really intense and they say, you're only 1 centimeter, go home. And you know in your heart of hearts that things are progressing and that baby's going to be born any minute. But they're sending you home because they're using the cervix checks as a gatekeeping way of keeping you out of the hospital until they feel you need to be there. And this is why so many people will go and leave the hospital only to have their baby in their car or as they're walking out the door. Your cervix means absolutely nothing. Your instincts are what matters. And another thing that you need to really understand is that if you're stressed, your cervix is going to close up. If you're relaxed, your cervix will open. And that is just the way it is. It's not meant to stay super tightly closed the whole time. It's a sphincter. It will release as it needs to. And eventually your baby will come out, whether you have a single exam or not. One last warning. You agree to cervix checks. Some care providers might just strip your membranes or break your waters just because, just to get things going. So you go into that check at 40 weeks and you're not really dilated, but your care provider decides, while I'm in there, I'm going to sweep your membranes just to get things going because otherwise labor's not going to start and then we'll have to induce you. First of all, BS. I call BS on that. The fact is that they're now trying to do something that you don't need to have done. Because maybe you're a 42-week mama. Maybe your baby is only 5 pounds right now, and next week there'll be the ideal birth weight to come out, and your body just needs that extra time. Hey, some of my friends, they have 6-pound babies at 42 weeks. So your care provider saying, oh, we'll just do a membrane sweep just to get things going so that we can avoid an induction. Guess what? They're already trying to induce you. That is already an induction. And the next one, of course, is if you're in labor and they do the cervix check, they might break your waters. They'll break them and say, oops, they broke on accident. Sometimes it's not an accident. In fact, there's some gloves that have a little tiny pointer thing that they can poke and break your bag of waters. And you'll never know because you agreed to that cervix check and you can't tell the difference whether it broke on purpose or if they broke naturally. But the fact is that now that your waters have released and you're in the hospital, you're on the clock again. And then you're on your way to a C-section. So I can't get into any more, but if you want to know more about the BS things that your care provider may do or things that you want to avoid, if you're really wanting to have a natural birth, either one that's your first time natural birth after having been induced or having had multiple cesareans or one cesarean, or this is a first time natural birth that you really want to do this and you want to avoid a C-section at all costs, then I have actually created something. I wrote it up today. It's 20 things that you want to avoid in order to have a natural birth. I'll send it to you right now. I'll put it in your inbox. You give me your best email and I'll just give it to you because I want you to have this. I keep seeing this over and over. I see the induction stories happening. We're getting into the summertime and more inductions are going to be done. We're getting into the May long weekend for those of you in Canada and specifically in the BC Lower Mainland. So again, you need to know that we need to get on this. You need to know these things. You need to know these 20 things to avoid because some of them you wouldn't even think of. Some of them you would be like, oh, I didn't realize that this was undermining my confidence to have a natural birth. But now that I know, I can actually avoid it. And then I won't make that mistake that leads me right into a C-section. We have a 1 in 3 C-section rate, and it's not an accident. It's because of induction, it's because of Pitocin, it's because of the fact that we keep speeding up labor and undermining your confidence in the maternity care system and in mainstream childbirth education, like from the hospitals, what the nurses are teaching. They don't teach everything. And I want you to know this. So I gathered up all of the best stuff. I went through this book with a fine-tooth comb, and I picked out the best things that you need to know in order to avoid that fate, in order to avoid that birth trauma, that 45% birth trauma rate. I want you to avoid it. I want you to avoid an unnecessary cesarean. I want you to avoid an unnecessary induction. I want you to be able to birth your baby with confidence and have that physiological birth that you're dreaming of. You deserve it. Okay, so that's all I have for you today. And if you want more support ever, just send me a message anytime. Okay, I'll see you tomorrow. Bye.